Hi, I've decided to do a presentation on Trifles by Suzanne Glaspel. My name is Malak Madany and I am presenting to Professor A.T. Before we get into the story, I would like to talk about the author, Miss Suzanne Keating Glaspel. She was born on July 1st, 1876 in Denver, Iowa. She enrolled at Drake University at only the age of 21. She then began showing interest in writing. She then moved to write 9 novels, which is amazing, especially for a woman at that time. She also wrote 15 plays and a biography. She has one of her most notable plays, which is Trifles. It is a true story based on the murder of John Hossack, which Glaspel reported on while working as a journalist for the Des Moines Daily News. Here's a close-up of Mrs. Glaspel. So to get on the story, I want to introduce you to the characters. George Henderson, the county attorney. Mr. Henry Peters, the local sheriff and husband of Mrs. Peters. Lewis Hale, the neighbor of the Wrights. Mrs. Peters, wife of the sheriff. Mrs. Hale, neighbor to the Wrights and wife of Lewis Hale. John Wright, the victim and the owner of the house. Mrs. Minnie Wright, John Wright's wife, and his suspected murderer. I would like to point out that she's never actually seen in the play, and I feel as though the author wanted to do that because she wanted the audience to conclude their own conclusions about her. So we get into the play. I want to give you a little summary, just a bit of background. The story starts off with John Wright being murdered in his rural Iowa farmhouse. The suspected killer is his wife. She says she didn't do it, but the county sheriff has to look around and search if she actually did or did not. Then we have Mrs. Peters and Mrs. Hale, who find little clues that she actually did murder him. They find the dead canary, which actually cracks the case wide open, but they choose not to tell the sheriff or anybody. They kind of kept it to themselves because they saw that the house was so, it did not have any life to it, and so they wanted to almost feel bad for her and justify the killing. So then we get into the symbols of Trifles. First, we have the jar of preserves. The jar of preserves represents the trifles. Trifles basically means something that is little to no importance in a way. Trifles that it shows in the story, it shows the trifles that women worry about, things that are really not important at all. Like Mrs. Hale previously mentioned, some preserves are symbolic of all the women's works that men consistently disrespect throughout the play. Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters immediately feel bad for Mrs. Wright, and they see the preserves have been shattered. It is fair to note that it is very hard to make these preserves, and they do take a long time as well. So I see why they would feel bad about it. Then we have the symbol of the dead bird. It basically just represents how Mrs. Minnie, she's been like a dead bird in a way. Mrs. Hale says, she come to think of it, she was kind of like a bird herself, real sweet and pretty, but kind of timid and fluttery. How did she change? It's suggesting that she was free as a bird, but after marrying Mr. John Wright, she became very dead inside. She had no life to her. Then we have the symbol of the cage, which is represented for Mrs. Minnie because she was trapped in that house like an animal. The cage was showing the audience that the little freedom Mrs. Minnie had. Then we have the beginning to an end. As you can see, that's what I had the title for my presentation. I do want to point out that it is evident that Mrs. Minnie Wright did kill her husband, but it is not really mentioned that she did or did not. It is up to the audience to judge, actually, and that's what I really liked about the play, and that's one of the reasons that I chose it. The real question is, does she deserve prison time, or was she pushed to her limit? In a way, I feel like she was, because she was mistreated. The house was very cold. There was barely any light. Nothing that a woman should live with, or even a man. Many have actually debated the topic, but there is no real outcome. Like, does she deserve it or does she not? But the reader must understand this happened many, many years ago, where a woman could not divorce. It was almost looked down upon or shameful for a woman to even think of such thing. But now we have things like women can vote. We can finally vote, get an education, and divorce whenever we desire. And most importantly, women do not have to be told they are worrying about trifling things. And just to see how times have changed is just such a beautiful thing to me. And that is also one of the reasons why I chose this play. It's for women's rights, to see how far we've come along. And lastly, these are my citations. I got my citations from Galileo, and everything is from Galileo. So if you have any questions, please shoot me a text or even email me. Thank you.